Oxford, England, 1980. A physicist stands over a stack of legal paperwork holding the rights to a discovery that will one day sit inside almost every phone, laptop, and electric car on Earth. He signs it away. Not for a fortune, for nothing. The rights go to a British Atomic Energy Agency, and the man who found the material gets no royalties, no ownership, no cut of a technology worth, by some estimates, hundreds of billions of dollars. Giving away his own invention wasn't even the strangest thing that had happened to him. 34 years earlier, a professor had told him to his face that he was already too late to matter in science. He would spend the rest of his life proving exactly how wrong that sentence was, and it would take the world nearly 40 years to admit it. This is the story of John Bannister Goodenough and the billion-dollar invention he gave away. In 1946, a 23-year-old Army veteran walked into the University of Chicago to register for graduate study in physics. The man behind the desk was John Simpson, a physicist who had just helped trigger the first self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction under Enrico Fermi. Simpson looked at the paperwork, looked at Goodenough, and said something Goodenough would repeat word for the rest of his life. "I don't understand you veterans. Don't you know that anyone who has ever done anything significant in physics had already done it by the time he was your age, and you want to begin?" By the accepted logic of the field, Goodenough was finished before he'd started. Physics, everyone knew, was a young person's game. The great insights come before 30, or they don't come at all. He enrolled anyway. What Simpson didn't know was that Goodenough had already spent a childhood clawing his way past a much steeper obstacle. He grew up outside New Haven, Connecticut, with undiagnosed dyslexia, in an era when there was no such diagnosis to give him. You were simply a backward student. He struggled to read and write. He taught himself to write well enough to pass an entrance exam for boarding school at age 12. Convinced that a career built on words, law, politics, literature, would never work for him, he steered toward numbers instead and made his way into Yale to study mathematics. War interrupted that degree. The Army sent him to work as a meteorologist. He finished his math degree almost by accident on the strength of Army course credit. None of that fit the myth people like to tell about scientific genius, the prodigy who always knew, who never doubted, who was born fluent in the language of discovery. Goodenough was, by his own account, a man who had to teach himself to read and was told, at the exact moment he tried to start a career in physics, that he had already missed his window. He went into that Chicago office anyway. He came out the other side with a PhD.
Before we continue, a quick request. If you're enjoying this story, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like. It helps YouTube recommend these documentaries to more curious minds. And if you're watching on your TV, which many of you do, you can simply press up on your remote and select the like button. It only takes a few seconds, and it genuinely helps the channel. Thank you.
Goodenough's physics career did not stall. It flourished. In 1952, fresh from Chicago, he joined MIT's Lincoln Laboratory and became part of the team that built the memory core for the SAGE air defense computer, an early form of random access memory, the technology that lets a computer instantly retrieve stored information. His research on magnetism in oxide materials led to a set of principles now called the Goodenough-Kanamori rules that are still taught in solid-state physics today. For nearly a quarter of a century, this was his world. Defense-funded materials research at the frontier of Cold War computing. Then, around 1970, the funding disappeared. Not because his science had failed, but because Congress decided that military research dollars had to serve military purposes, and Goodenough had started thinking about something else entirely: energy. He later put it bluntly: politics, not potential productivity, is the bull in the china shop of science administration. A man who had spent 24 years building a career inside America's defense research establishment found himself in his 50s with nowhere to do the work he actually wanted to do. He considered an offer to build an energy institute in pre-revolutionary Iran. Instead, in 1976, Oxford University asked him to head its inorganic chemistry laboratory, a striking invitation, since Goodenough had almost no formal training in chemistry. He was a physicist being handed a chemistry department. He took the job, and that same year, on the other side of the Atlantic, an oil company was about to hand him the problem that would define the rest of his life. The 1970s oil crisis had convinced Exxon that its future might not be oil forever, so the company funded pure research into alternatives, including a chemist named Stanley Whittingham, who built something remarkable: a rechargeable battery using lithium, the lightest metal on the periodic table, paired with a cathode made of titanium disulfide. It worked at room temperature. It held real promise for replacing bulky lead-acid batteries. Forbes practically declared the electric car reborn. Then the batteries started catching fire. The metallic lithium anode grew thread-like structures called dendrites during charging, which could pierce the battery's internal barrier and short-circuit the cell, sometimes violently. Titanium disulfide itself was expensive to produce and released toxic gas if it got wet. Exxon shelved the project. At Oxford, Goodenough had been paying attention. He believed the flaw wasn't the lithium, it was the cathode. If titanium disulfide, a metal sulfide, could store lithium ions, then a metal oxide might do it better, at a much higher voltage.
Working with his postdoctoral researcher, Koichi Mizushima, and graduate student Ned Godshall, Goodenough developed a cathode made from layered lithium cobalt oxide. The result, published in 1980, nearly doubled Whittingham's voltage, from about 2.4 volts to roughly 4 volts, while producing a far more stable, far less flammable battery. It was, materials scientists would later agree, the single discovery that made a genuinely useful lithium battery possible. And this is where Goodenough signed the patent away. Oxford wouldn't fund the cost of patenting it themselves, so Goodenough and Mizushima handed the rights to the UK's Atomic Energy Research Establishment in exchange for covering the paperwork, surrendering in the process any future royalties. He wasn't chasing a payout, he was chasing a working battery. He got the battery, he would never get the money. Here is the part of the story people rarely tell. After Goodenough solved the cathode problem in 1980, almost nothing happened. The patent sat with a British Atomic Energy Agency that had no interest in commercializing batteries. Goodenough's cathode was, for years, a solution without a product, brilliant on paper, dormant in practice. The battery still had one unsolved danger. It still used raw lithium metal for its negative electrode, the same dendrite problem that had doomed Whittingham's design. It took a chemist in Japan, Akira Yoshino at Asahi Kasei, working through the mid-1980s to replace that metallic lithium anode with a carbon-based material, first polyacetylene, later a form of carbon, that let lithium ions shuttle back and forth without ever depositing as raw metal. Paired with Goodenough's cathode,
that finally produced something safe enough to sell. Even then, the technology almost didn't make it to market. An Asahi Kasei engineer, convinced of its potential, quietly had prototypes built without formal approval and personally carried one to Sony. Sony saw what he saw. In 1991, Sony's first commercial lithium-ion battery went on sale inside a camcorder built on Goodenough's cathode and Yoshino's anode. Goodenough received nothing from it. Not licensing income, not a consulting contract, not a line in Sony's early marketing. The company that would go on to sell tens of millions of these batteries a year had built its breakthrough product on a discovery whose inventor had already given away his claim to it a decade earlier for the price of a patent filing fee. Sony alone would go on to sell roughly 3 million lithium-ion cells in 1993 and 15 million the year after that. The beginning of an industry now measured in the billions of units per year, running almost entirely on a cathode chemistry its own inventor no longer had any legal claim to.
By any reasonable measure, Goodenough's central scientific contribution was already made. He could have spent his later decades collecting honorary degrees. Instead, in 1986, at age 64, an age at which Oxford would soon have forced him into retirement, he moved to the University of Texas at Austin and kept working. He developed 2 more major battery chemistries there: lithium manganese oxide, now used in power tools and some electric vehicles, and lithium iron phosphate, which today is one of the most widely used cathode materials in the automotive industry. He later said he was grateful he hadn't been forced to retire at 65, the way Oxford's rules would have required. Decade after decade, the lithium-ion battery he had made possible kept spreading into camcorders, then laptops, then cell phones, then the 2008 Tesla Roadster, then grid-scale storage for solar and wind power. And decade after decade, the world kept associating the invention less with Goodenough than with the products it powered. He kept publishing. At 94, he and his lab filed a patent on a new solid-state battery design. At 99, he published a research paper in a peer-reviewed chemistry journal. Colleagues had, for years, predicted he would win a Nobel Prize. Each October, the prize went to someone else. In October 2019, the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences finally called John Goodenough. He was 97 years old, the oldest person in history ever to receive a Nobel Prize in any category. The prize was shared with Stanley Whittingham, whose pioneering battery had inspired the field, and Akira Yoshino, whose carbon anode finally made lithium-ion batteries safe enough for the marketplace. Their citation was beautifully simple: for the development of lithium-ion batteries. The Academy called lithium-ion batteries the technology that had created a rechargeable world. They pointed out that these lightweight batteries had transformed everything from mobile phones and laptops to electric vehicles and the storage of renewable energy, making possible the transition toward a fossil fuel-free society. When reporters asked Goodenough about finally winning after decades of waiting, he answered with characteristic humor, "Live to 97 and you can do anything." It was exactly the kind of answer you'd expect from a man who had spent a lifetime refusing to believe that age determines discovery. He never collected royalties on the cathode sitting inside the phone you're likely holding right now. He never got a cut of the battery pack in the electric car parked outside, or the grid storage units backing up solar farms, or the laptop this sentence might be read on. What he got, 39 years after signing away the rights, and 73 years after a professor told him he was already too late, was confirmation of something he seems to have known all along.
Being ignored by the market and being wrong are not the same thing. Every time a phone charges overnight without catching fire, it is running silently on the fix a supposedly too old, self-taught, chemistry-untrained physicist worked out in an Oxford lab in 1980 and gave away for free.